Hi, I'm Bill Arnold. Thank you for listening to this podcast. There are many more podcasts available at myfaithradio.com. Your support makes this possible. Thank you. Hi, this is Bill. I thought this interview was so good, I wanted you to hear it again. So enjoy. And a warm welcome to the afternoon show. I'm Bill Arnold, and I'm looking at my friend Dr. Tim Walsh here with me in studio, and we're going to talk about life on Mars. That's a great, intriguing topic. And Tim, I know you're going to make sense of all that. Tim is the chief officer at North Star Regional. You deal a lot with behavioral and emotional issues.
That's right. Yeah, substance abuse disorder treatment. And then also mental health, which is called co-occurring. We do residential treatment, outpatient, sober homes. We do the whole continuum of care for people who need that kind of treatment.
Mm-hmm. So when we talk about life on Mars, I know that's we're talking about Act 17, aren't we?
We are.
Yeah.
We are, exactly. Yeah, so the connection I'm going to make here, Bill, and I think we can just connect with something that I think many people, maybe your entire audience, is struggling with right now, which is, first of all, especially in the last 8 years, but then since 2020, people have got to feel like they've been on a different planet, right? Mm-hmm. The cultural divide, the gap between people, at least in our media and in our politics, is getting increasing. And then what's happening along with that, where it feels like people are dividing, they're compartmentalizing, and that we have to connect with them, of course, and to share, what we call the good news, the gospel, to share our faith. At the same time, it becomes increasingly difficult. It feels increasingly difficult to connect with people. So I just want to, echo and resonate with your listeners that you're not imagining it. Mm-hmm. You're not crazy. That is what's been happening. And of course, the most extreme example is what's going on in the Mideast. But right now, in our hearts and our prayers go out to them. But, even in our own society, we're seeing that level of division such that, we may be feeling that we're on life on Mars. But it's really a play on the words for the Apostle Paul in Acts 17. If people want to follow along, 16 to 31, the Apostle Paul is now in Greece. He just had to basically flee for his life as he went from Thessalonica, and he went down to Berea, and he even got trailed by a group of Jewish people that were very angry at him. And now he's in Athens, and every day when he's in Athens, he's speaking in what's called the marketplace, the agora, and he's talking with people every day, and he's reasoning with them, and he's also going to the synagogue, and then as the council of Athens learns about his teaching, what they think is that he's introducing strange gods into Athens, which shouldn't have been a problem because they had something like 30 to 40,000 idols at the time, right? A lot of idols. And so he gets called up to the Areopagus, which is the council, like the Supreme Court of Athens, one commentator called that. And so just the first thing that we learn about that is, and this is one way to connect, is Paul was, we can tell, immersed also in the culture. He understood that culture. And of course, that's one way to connect with people, is to understand from their viewpoint. Mm-hmm. What is their culture? What is their spirituality? What is their religion? How do we connect with people where they're at? And that's exactly what he did. He quoted their philosophers. He quoted their poets. He, of course, used their language. Paul grew up in Tarsus, which is this crossroads, a whole economic pathway that goes from Turkey all the way to Greece and into Europe. And so that's where he grew up. And so this is a person, Paul would have been very familiar with the culture, and he was very learned in their whole philosophy and their language, and even knew their obviously their politics. And so when I say life on Mars, Paul was on Mars Hill, what was called Mars Hill. He was called up. It actually says they took him up to the council. And now he is face to face with essentially, like I said, the court, the Supreme Court of Athens. And I don't think it was just there for a talk. I think they really, I think they're really bringing him before the court. And so what an excellent example of a culture clash of two, Apostle Paul coming from one world and the Athenians, the Greeks coming from another world, and different philosophies and religions all together. And here he has this opportunity to now share the good news with this council. So what did he do? That's the question, right? What did he do to make that spiritual connection with people? And so just so we can connect with that, we're faced with this every day.
Every day?
Yeah, in the workplace.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
Everywhere. In the workplace, we're faced with it in our own families. Sometimes we're looking at our own children and going, wow, are we spiritually connecting with them, our family members?
Right.
And so on. And so that is the lesson that we can pull from that. And of course, what I'm going to do, Bill, is what I always do when I talk to you, is I'm going to connect that to what I believe to be the best research on how to communicate people about spirituality. We've called it, neurotheology, neurocognitive research. Some people call it neurospirituality, but it's essentially taking the research on the body and the brain of what transforms the body and brain, speaking in that language to people, and now they can relate that, wait a minute, is there something about me that is spiritual, and that if I connect to this way of living, spiritually speaking, that I can now actually start connecting with God. Now, the way he did it, perhaps maybe even offends some of our sensibilities about evangelism these days, but I think he was inspired to do so by the Holy Spirit, wasn't he? So that's what leads me up to talk about, okay, what did he do, and how then can we apply that in spiritually connecting with other people?
You're talking about what did Paul do?
That's right. What did Paul do?
How did what he do apply to what we can do?
That's right.
All right, because you can't go talking over my head, Tim, because I'm a C student, all right? So when you start talking neuroscience, Wyatt might understand it, but you got to be careful with me.
Okay.
All right.
Okay. I'll break it down.
All right.
I'll break it down.
Yeah.
Yeah, good. So the first thing that he did, in our field, Bill, we call that spiritual integration. So it was interesting in my field of therapy, psychology, is in the last several years, all of these different fields, social work, mental health, marriage and family therapy, they all adopted ethics that said, hey, you got to actually integrate the spirituality of the people that you're working with. Mm-hmm. That was the new ethical bent, and that you have to be responsive also to their culture. Well, great. How do you do that? How do you do that? And so we make different cultural bridges that way. But the way that the Apostle Paul did it is, first of all, he went to them, used their language, their culture, their poets, their philosophy, their thinking, and he integrated that truth into what he was sharing in terms of the good news. I think that's powerful all by itself.
Smart.
Yeah.
So smart.
Yeah.
So smart.
Very smart guy. And so here's some things, like when we do substance abuse treatment, we will say that they need to, the first step, that powerlessness, and then that acceptance, and then the willingness to accept the will of a higher power than themselves. Mm-hmm. And at first Christians go, well, that's, don't we know the name of who that is? Why can't we just jump to that? Well, because you got to meet people where they're at. And so we even use language like God as you understand God, not because every conception of God is true and equal. That's not the point of that. It's to connect with people where they are at. And then you then work with them where they're at, then to bring them to where they can be, spiritually speaking.
Mm-hmm. Dr. Tim Walsh is my guest. He's the chief officer at North Star Regional Mental Health Services, and it also applies to addiction and recovery. And Tim, when you talk about the meeting people where they're at, which I think is really critical, I think the authors of the Big Blue Book, the recovery book, and they would say, God as you understand him, their intention was, from what I've read, is It's your understanding of Jesus, how much you know about him.
Mm-hmm.
Now, I think that's been maybe shifted a little bit just to, get people not closed-minded.
Yes.
Because they really can't think spiritually until they first get sober.
Yes, that's right.
Isn't that true?
Yeah, that's right. And of course, also, when I talk to clients, like I do a presentation on spiritual awakening, I do groups on spiritual awakening. And so when you get into that, you got to start with where they're at in terms of, give me your name for God. What is your name for God?
Yeah.
And again, not because I'm coming from a perspective of all are equal and all are the same, but I am coming from a position of respect and curiosity. That's what we talked about last time. We talked about culturally connecting with people. Well, spiritually connecting with people, you start with where they're at.
Yeah.
And so then you hear all these different names for God. And by the way, I think God knows who he is.
Oh, there's no problem there.
He has no problem there. And so you start with that, and then you can start proceeding to asking a question, an innocent question and a curious question of, tell me what God is like.
I like
tell me what God is like. So now I'm not preaching at them. Now I'm now interacting with them, and I'm hearing what they think God is like. I think we might be surprised at what they come up with. It's very, very similar to the characteristics that we would attribute to God. Now, what have we done? We've now actually increased, and we're talking to them at a level, a spiritual level, and we're now increasing. We call it, increasing your conscious contact with God, right, or your higher power. That's what we say, and I think that's actually what's happening now. In the Christian tradition, we call it centering prayer. And centering prayer is to actually think about the person you are praying to, the person of God. Mm-hmm. And so you start thinking about, who is God? What is God like? Who is God to me? Well, that opens up a whole conversation with people, and now they're telling you where they're coming from with that. And what's fascinating to me when I start asking about that is they share things that we would also, I think, agree with. They will say, when you think of God, what is God like? And they will say, God is loving. Well, I have no disagreement with that God is compassionate, that God is forgiving, that God is all-powerful, that God is everywhere. And then I go further with that understanding. I say, okay, is God here? Is God with us in this room? Again, their name for God. Is God with us? Wow. And then they almost all the time they say yes. Oh, okay. Can God actually connect us as human beings to each other? Does God do that? And they say yes, generally speaking. Mm-hmm. And then we go one step further. You see where we're going with this, Bill?
Oh, do I ever.
And then we ask, can God be within you? Can God be within you, right? Mm-hmm. Most of them, almost all of them say yes. Do you see what we've already done? We've created exactly what Paul did. That's where he started off with the Athenians. He started off with an understanding of who God is. And he even used their words, their poetry, their philosophy to express back to them the truth of who God is. Mm-hmm. So that's a starting point. And so I would go even further than that, so if God can be within you, and I say, it's an interesting word like enthusiasm. You know what that means, guys? No. What does that mean? That means the God within, the God within you. And they go, wow, that's really cool. So now we created a connection, haven't we? Mm-hmm. As we've done that. And so you start with, who is God to them? And that's exactly what the Apostle Paul did when he was at Life on Mars Hill. And then also, of course, again, he went to where they are. Where's the council? They're at the Areopagus. Mm-hmm. He goes right to them. Now he's brought to them, right? Mm-hmm. And so how do we apply that? You asked me, why did I talk to 200 guys at Lino Lakes Prison, just this last week? Why? Because that's where they're at. Right. That's where they're at. That's where people who are hungry, who are searching, actually in these set of verses, it says that human beings are groping in the dark, searching for God. Isn't that descriptive? I think that's a powerful description of what people are at. So, but what is it appealing to? It's appealing to this hunger. It's like the St. Augustine says, that our hearts are hunger, right? That we're not satisfied till we find our satisfaction in Him. Our hearts are restless till we find our rest in Thee, is what Augustine said. But that's the idea. So now we're reaching them as human beings, knowing, as they say, that they have a God-shaped hole within them, that they have this hunger, that they have a sense of the eternal within them, okay? And so, good place to start, isn't it, in terms of the Apostle Paul?
Well, it's a fantastic place. Dr. Tim Walsh is my guest. And Tim, if you said, well, what do you call him and what is he like? And you're asking that question, and if the response was, well, he's the big guy in the sky, and he's kind of a mean boss. Right. You've learned a lot in a very short amount of time.
Yeah, that's right. Exactly. Now you know where they're at. And so what's interesting on that point, Bill, is actually, you wanted me to break it down in terms of the science of this. There's actually research on that if your image of God is one who is wrathful, angry, vengeful, punishing, shaming, and so on. They've done studies now. It actually damages your brain. Now, there's a good conversation starter.
That's really
there's a good conversation starter, and then opposite. If your image of God, what you image God to yourself is loving, kind, compassionate, forgiving, personal, relational. What does it do? It actually results in growth in the connections within your brain. It results in brain health, body health, and the outcomes for our life are just so much better.
Yeah.
And this is a matter of science. I'm speaking the language of science, but is that not the good news?
No, that's great news. All right, we're going to take a break. Dr. Tim Walsh is my guest. We're talking about life on Mars, according to Acts chapter 17. If you have a question or comment, let me know. I'd love to hear from you. 877-933-2484. I'll say it one more time. 877-933-2484. Be right back. Hi, this is Bill. I thought this interview was so good, I wanted you to hear it again. So enjoy. My guest is Dr. Tim Walsh. He's got a pretty fancy job. You do? Pretty fancy job. Chief, I don't know, chief officer. That sounds like it's pretty important.
That's the simple title, yeah.
People, do they salute you when you walk by? What happens?
I don't make them do that in public, no.
Okay.
Yeah. In private, that's another deal. Bill.
Yeah, I get that. I get that. Yeah. And you're at North Star Regional. Explain that one more time. People just got in their car, and who are you, and what is North Star Regional?
Yeah, so I'm the Chief of Behavioral Health. North Star Regional is a substance use disorder and co-occurring treatment, which means both substance use disorder and mental health treatment. And we do everything from outpatient services to residential treatment. We actually provide lodging to people while they're going through intensive outpatient. We provide sober homes. So the whole continuum of care for somebody who's struggling with those issues.
Yeah. You said that so much better than I would have said it.
Oh.
I mean, I could have.
Then I'm glad I said it.
No, seriously, I could have memorized your bio and stumbled through it, and it just rolled off your tongue. Yeah. I'm saluting you.
Yeah.
For those who
privately, yes.
Privately, yes, I'm saluting you. Yeah. All right, let's go back to life on Mars. We're talking about Paul in Acts chapter 17 and what it was like to be on Mars Hill.
Yeah, so he's on Mars Hill, and of course it's a complete culture clash, between the Athenians. There's Stoics, they're Epicureans, they're Platonists, and it's like he's on a different planet. He's coming from one planet, they're coming from another, and of course the way we can connect to that is I'm guessing most of us feel like that with our own society, our own culture, or just being in this world oftentimes, and yet we long to and even have a mission to spiritually connect with people and share with them the good news. But how do you do that when you're worlds apart with other people, when you have this huge cultural gap between people? And that's where I think we can get an example from Paul. But, also, I think that in my field, we have to do that. We ethically have to respond to the spiritual or faith or religion of our clients, respect that. And then we also, I have to be responsive to it, which means take that and make that a part of their treatment. So essentially, I have life on Mars every day, Bill. That's how I landed on that title. So as we proceed through this, we find out that the other thing that Paul did is it says he reasoned in the synagogues and in the marketplace, and it says to whoever was there, he reasoned. And of course, the Bible has other things about be ready to give a defense, a reasonable defense of your faith, right? It says lots of things like that. And that's the way he was connecting with them first. He was connecting through their minds. And I do this exercise with my clients where I take an AANA saying, which goes like this: as your body goes, so goes your mind. As your mind goes, so goes your heart. As your heart goes, so goes your spirit. And if you think about that in your own experience, I think that's literally experientially true.
Can you say that again, Tim?
Sure. So as your body goes, so goes your mind.
What does that mean now?
Okay. So and here's a simple exercise that I do with them. I'll have, and I'll describe it to your audience. I just have them put their hands up like we might do in worship. Just put your hands up and then you tilt your head towards the ceiling.
Okay.
That's all we do.
Okay.
And then I say, now tell me, how are you feeling in your body right now?
So as your body goes, then your mind goes.
That's right.
Okay. And that
how are you feeling? How are you feeling in your body right now? And then then I say, any words or images that are coming to your mind right now?
Mm-hmm.
Great. Any feelings or emotions that you're having right now in what we'd call your heart. And then they start emotionally connecting to what's going on with their body and their mind.
Interesting.
And then I asked them, I said, is there any, I said, we'll call it a message or a sensation or an image, anything that you'd say is occurring to your spirit right now, because we all have spirits, right? Mm-hmm. All human beings have spirits.
Sounds a little new agey right now.
Does it?
Just a little bit. Okay. That's okay. I mean, I trust you and I know your heart. I'm just saying, I'm trying to listen objectively.
Yeah, sure.
Yeah.
Sure. So, no, the whole notion is, and that's where we go next, Bill. Thanks for bringing that up. Mm-hmm. So it's increasing your conscious contact with who? With God.
With God, yes.
With God. Mm-hmm. With God, yeah. So, and actually I kind of anticipated that some people might hear it that way, but, so if you think about Acts 2, the book of Acts, what happens in the book of Acts 2? The apostles speak in their language, but then the Holy Spirit translates it essentially into everyone else's language. So God does God's part. In bringing people to himself. It says that even faith is a gift from God, right? Doesn't the Bible say that? Mm-hmm. And so we rely on God to give the gift of faith. And it even says that God is working on people before they come to faith, right?
Absolutely.
And then, if you jump to Romans, 8, we find out that it's the Spirit of God, and it says that God is the searcher of our hearts. I'm going to say it again. In Romans 8, it says, God is the searcher of our hearts. And how does he do that? He does that through the Holy Spirit that then search our hearts and then communicates back to him. Does this make sense? Mm-hmm. That's not New Age.
No, not at all.
That is not New Age. Mm-hmm. That is trust and faith in God, that God is going to take people where they're at and he's going to lead them to where they need to go in terms of their faith, right? Mm-hmm. So... and I would say that, by the way, everything that I'm talking about has a solid tradition within Christian practice as well, that we are supposed to get our bodies into praise and worship. We're supposed to get our bodies into prayer. We're supposed to get our bodies into meditation.
Posture is important.
That's right. And even more than that, when we talk about being transformed by the renewing of our mind, I could go on and on, as you can tell. As we talk about being renewed by our mind, back up to Romans 12:1. It says to present our
bodies as living
sacrifices. As a living sacrifice, right, to God, right? So I want to encourage, Christians to get your bodies into it. Because you will enhance your spiritual experience. And as you reach out to God, what does the Bible say for those who earnestly seek him?
He's a rewarder of those.
That's right. He's a rewarder of those who earnestly seek him. And by the way, we're going to find him because he finds us. Right. So that's where I would say that, I do a lot of things with clients that start awakening their human spirit. You're exactly right on that. I do things that do that, but I trust that God does his part and is present. And I even pray that way, that God is present and God does what he does. Mm-hmm. And do I even challenge, do I have to do what his role for him? Do I need to do God's job for him?
No.
I'm going to say no.
Yes.
Yeah. Does that make sense?
Yep.
Okay, good.
Sense. Yeah.
Good. Thanks for challenging that. Exactly what happened to...
I was nice about it, wasn't I?
You were very nice.
Oh, good.
Yeah.
Because there's an incredible connection between body and mind. Because as a guy who was in a theater production for 22 years, when you are learning and you're remembering your lines, it's completely connected to the movements you're making on stage and the gestures you're making. And as you walk to point B from point A, that's when your mind remembers what to do.
Wow. Yeah.
You know, if we sit around a table and say, let's just run lines, we can't do it. And I've done the show 3,800 times because you got to be moving. You got to be doing what your body does in order to remember the words. And I sometimes think you don't have the words unless you get your body in a posture to praise and worship him.
That's right.
Right? It doesn't have to be fancy. It doesn't have to be big, right? You just have to create a posture.
Think about how simple all I did was with them.
It was so simple.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I don't think you asked, you didn't push them out of their comfort zone either.
No. And it's amazing what comes out of that too. I can tell it's not just increasing, their spiritual consciousness. It's not, you can start to see that people are connecting.
I believe that.
Yeah. And so that's cool. It's actually very powerful when that happens. The next thing we come across, Bill, is you got these, Areopagus council members, the Supreme Court of Athens, and they're saying that Paul's ideas are strange ideas, and that the people of Athens, every day, it basically says all day, they were into the latest ideas. And so what do we take from that? It doesn't mean we adopt everything from the culture, everything that's new and latest and so on. That's not what that means. But should we be interesting? Should we be intellectually challenging? Should we be entertaining sometimes?
Engaging, winsome.
Yeah.
A little bit of banter.
A little bit, like you and me, perhaps.
Yeah. A little bit,
there you go.
Yeah.
There you go. So that's another thing I take from that. And so when we're doing therapy, and of course, that word, the root word means healing. When you're doing therapy with people, you got to experientially connect them. It's just like we're talking about. They have to experience what you're talking about.
Because your brain needs to do it, doesn't it? That's
right. Yeah. And so how does that apply to everybody? Well, how do we connect with people relationally, emotionally, experientially? That's what Paul is showing us here. And in this whole section of the Bible, he goes in ways that we would not expect in our modern mindset about what is evangelism. We would not expect how he would approach the Athenians, and that's why. And actually, even me saying it, notice how challenging that is for us to think that way. So the next thing is, what does he react to? Paul becomes agitated, angry about all the idols he sees. And I heard one commentator said that word in classic Greek or anywhere else at that time is nowhere. In other words, Paul invents a word. Idolatry, not the Hebrew sense of the idolatry. He's talking about that here these Athenians they're worshiping the works of their hands, and they're worshiping these bronze metal statues and so on. And so what does he take that though? He says, he makes the connection with idolatry to what? That applies to absolutely everyone we talk to. Everybody worships something.
That's so true.
Everybody worships something. So you go down to the depths of the human heart and human nature. Everyone exalts something to ultimate importance. And so application, what do I ask my clients? What gives you life? What fills you full of life? And do you suppose that might excite some sort of spiritual sense and spiritual longing? I'm going to say yes, that's what happens. And then I ask them what takes the life out of them or what sucks the life out of them. And then they get to that. And then they start describing what it is in their life and of course their addiction is one of the number one things that takes the life out of them. But just think how basic that is. All I asked them is what gives them life.
And what takes away.
And takes away, right.
Yeah.
And I'll ask them what emotions come and go quickly and what emotions stay and they last. And that leads us down another pathway too.
That's so interesting. Dr. Tim Walsh is my guest. He is the chief officer at North Star Regional, which is a treatment center. So if you have a question regarding anything related to addiction, substance abuse, or what we are discussing today, you can text me the comment or question to 877-933-2484. You can also email me, bill@myfaithradio.com. Be right back. Hi, this is Bill. I thought this interview was so good, I wanted you to hear it again. So enjoy.
It's the afternoon show with Bill Arnold. Prime time, drive time. Let's get it started. Jump in your car. Yeah. What's for dinner? It's the afternoon show with Bill Arnold.
Our guest today is Dr. Tim Walsh. He is the chief officer at North Star Regional, which is a treatment facility. Am I saying that right, Tim?
Yes.
Okay, cool. And I've got some comments that have come in. Here is a freshman girl. So what are you, 14 or 15 if you're a freshman in high school?
Yeah.
Died by
16,
suicide. And the question is there a way a layperson, like just a volunteer, could go to the school and help using the principles that you're talking about?
Yes. So first of all, one of the things that we do in therapy that anyone can do is you connect to the emotion that's most, salient or, right in the forefront of somebody's mind and heart. And so what is it that the emotion that's coming forward here, and that gateway, that doorway to that person's heart is actually despair. We have an epidemic of despair. And that despair is expressing itself and manifesting itself in so many different ways, Bill. It's not just drug addiction and overdoses. It is also accidents. It is violence. It is mental health issues of mood disorders. It's manifesting despair in all these different ways. And so a person typically who is considering suicide is at a place where they don't think that there's any option, there's no way out. Their pain is never going to go away. This suffering is going to continue forever, especially if you're a freshman in high school. You're thinking what I'm feeling right now will go on forever, and it's never going to change. And there's no hope and there's no help. Okay, I just said a lot about the voice of despair. We actually have ways of talking about all of that bring hope, don't we? So now you connected to what's really going on with a person emotionally, and now what you can talk about is there help. Okay, now we talk about where the help comes from. Okay, is this going to pass, or am I going to be able to manage this better in the future? Will my future be better? It will. Will I be better in the future? Yes, if I get the help and support that I need, I can have a better future. I can be the person that I want to be. I can feel better. Remember that when people seek help, the number one thing they want, to feel better. To feel better. So how can you immediately help that person to feel better? What can you do to support them to feel better? And of course, if they're in that state of despair, they of course might need professional help. Some people may even need, hospitalization in that situation. So that's what we have to discern in that moment. But despair is pervasive with young people right now, and so we do need to connect to hope. And listen to the words that I was saying about that. Can my life be good? Can my life be better? Is there a way out of this? Am I going to feel this way forever? Now we start responding to truly what that person is struggling with, and even that by itself can increase their hope.
All right, Tim, that is a lot to think about. It's when you're meeting people at their emotional pain, and if they're in despair and you're meeting them there and encouraging them with hope, how can we convince them that there is hope? Yeah.
So I start with where they're at, and so if I jump to Jesus is the hope, Jesus, if they give their life to Jesus, that's where the hope is going to come from. Now, I think ultimately, as Christians, that's what we would believe. But is that where you start? Is that where you start? Again, you have to connect with them, and you don't want to alienate them. You want to start where they're at. That's not where I start. I start with the emotion itself, and now we start to talk about what is the pathway to feeling better? What is the pathway to getting hope? What is the pathway out of my current circumstance? And that's when we start connecting to, actually, what I start talking about is there's a way of life Think about this. I don't just jump to, Jesus' answer. By the way, Paul didn't either. He doesn't mention Jesus once in this entire section. Think about that. Not once. He talks about Jesus as the man that God resurrected. And so I connect with what? When I'm talking about hope, I'm connecting to a way of life that we can start practicing now that will increase not just a sense of hope, but a sense of love, of peace, of serenity, of contentment, of joy, right? We start talking about a pathway, things that they can do. That's in psychology, we call that behavioral activation. All that means is start doing something that's going to help you to feel better. Okay, so I think that's an excellent place to start.
Okay. Dr. Tim Walsh is my guest, and we're talking about life on Mars, and we're talking about life on Mars Hill, according to Acts chapter 17, where Paul would be reasonable. He would go and debate. And there's a passage in this that is so important to me, Tim, and it's in verse 18 when some ask them, what is this babbler trying to say? That's me most days here at Faith Radio. Don't laugh. If you're laughing, you're agreeing with it. So.
No, I was thinking about myself.
Okay.
And by the way, I listened to the Greek word there that they use.
Yeah.
Is seed picker.
Seed picker?
A seed picker, yeah. Meaning you're like a bird who's just pecking around. It sounds like you're smart, sounds like you're intelligent, but you're just pecking around and you don't really know what you're talking about.
All right,
that's what a babbler is.
That's our show for the day. I'm going home.
Oh, I don't mean you. Yeah,
oh, no, okay.
No, yeah. Very good. No, so what I love is already, your audience is starting to say, oh, and this is something I can use because when I go full gospel on them, that hasn't gone well. And Paul didn't go full gospel on them, did he? And yet he got the good news across. Right. In fact, he got them to the next step where some were intrigued, some sneered at him, right? That's the end. And some followed. And isn't that where we want to get? Is to that point. So the next thing, Paul says to them is, he goes, oh, Athenians, you're very religious. And in one translation says, you're very superstitious. Okay, so what's the application there? Even with people who we're calling the nuns, N-O-N-E-S, the nuns, over 25% now people have no affiliation to any religion, any denomination whatsoever. And it's an increasing group. In fact, it's the largest faction in the United States now. Or people who are increasingly calling themselves agnostic. In other words, I don't know. Agnostic, I don't know. And then you got a huge group of people that say they're spiritual, but they reject any notion of organized religion, right?
They don't want any kind of doctrine making decisions on their life.
No, that's right. That's right. Yeah, and they're suspicious of organized religion in general. Okay, that's not where Paul goes. Paul doesn't criticize any of that. Where he goes is, you are this. He starts with, so he would say it in modern day language. He goes, oh, you're a spiritual person? You are a spiritual person. Because by definition, as human beings, we do have a human spirit.
Right.
It doesn't mean we're spiritually connecting to the right things.
Right.
But we do have this capacity. We do have this capacity to be spiritual, right?
Yeah.
And isn't that interesting that he recognizes that in them? Now he has a common ground. And so what I'll ask, again, I'm trying to give an application with every single one of these, Bill. And one of the things I ask clients is, okay, what would you call the person that is aware of you all the time, that's conscious of you all the time? What would you call that person?
At one point, it would have been my mother.
And I mean, of course, the part of themselves, right?
Yeah.
That's that's good. Anyway, so they have different names for this part of themselves. Some people say soul. Some people say spirit. Some people say mind. Some people say consciousness. I've gotten angel a few times. I don't know. I don't quite know what that means yet. But anyway, what are they getting to with that? They're saying that they're more than the sum of their parts and they're more than their body. That there's some part of themselves that is the whole of themselves, which we would call spirit, right? And do I really at that moment care what they call it? No, because at that point, now they are actually kicking into this level of consciousness and awareness of themselves. And is that a good thing? Well, yeah, it depends on what they connect to, right? But so the application is that I get right to their ultimate nature. And now they're saying that their ultimate nature is something other than their body, just of their body self and this existence. And so they've elevated to a different awareness of themselves, okay? Is that a good start? I think it is.
Oh, I do too.
Yeah.
It's fantastic.
And so I think you pronounce this philosopher's name Desjardins.
I love that guy, yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, one of his famous quotes, if I may say it,
yes.
We're all spiritual beings having a human experience.
That's right. Yeah.
I don't know, is that the one you were going to pick out or not?
That is exactly the one I picked
wow.
out. You're not a human being having a spiritual experience. You're a spiritual being having a human experience.
Yeah, so you know it better than I do.
Yeah.
Tim, let me take a quick break. We'll come back to that when we return. And thank you for pronouncing his name correctly. I've never been able to say it well.
Is that right?
Yeah.
Yeah, okay, good.
I always say that French guy. It's very, very respectful. Anyway, Dr. Tim Walsh is my guest. We'll take a break and be right back. Hi, this is Bill. I thought this interview was so good, I wanted you to hear it again. So enjoy. I'm with Dr. Tim Walsh, and we are talking about life on Mars. And by that we mean Mars Hill, when Paul in Acts chapter 17 was having all kinds of conversations and debates. And they did ask him things like, may we know what this new teaching is that you are presenting? You are bringing some strange ideas to our ears, and we would like to know what they mean.
Yeah. Isn't that good?
That's fantastic.
Yeah, it is. Yeah. So where Paul goes next, which again, I think is an amazing common ground to even connect with people spiritually, is he talks about God as the creator and sustainer of life, but he uses their words, their philosophy, their poets to say that. And it's one of my favorite verses. It says, who is God? It says, in whom we live and move and have our being. In whom we live and move and have our being. By the way, he takes three of the primary aspects of philosophy, and in one sentence, he captures who God is. In whom we live and move and have our being.
Okay, that's a mic drop moment right there.
It is, yeah. So he starts with their understanding, but here's what he does. You know, all of their idols are, of course, within this existence, within this creation, all that, and they're all created. And there's just stone and all that. But he says God is outside of all of that. He is the creator. Your creatures and everything you're done, including your idols, is all created by you, right? And so that's where he goes. And now they have to elevate to, whoa, God the creator, and God sustaining all of life. I live and move and have my being within him. You know, wow. I mean, so he just blows their minds. He absolutely blows their minds with that. And so, I do a spiritual exercise, which is designed to create a sense of awe or inspiration. I start talking about, you know, what is the universe like? What is creation like? And then they'll even say that. I'll ask the clients, do you think there's like a design or patterns in the universe? And they almost always say yes. And then I said, do you think there's even like an intelligence? Like it seems to be reasonable, that it even makes sense in a way? Yes. Oh, okay. Do you think that, you know, that there's even something like a sense of a greater being or a higher power that kind of holds it all together? And they almost always, Bill, say yes. And then I'm going, oh, okay. So is there any sort of a mind or a consciousness to the universe that way? And then I'll even connect to that, you know, there's a lot of quantum physics theorists that will say that consciousness is the nature of reality, you know. So what are they describing? What the Greeks would call the logos. And we'd call the logos who? Yeah. Jesus, right. Yeah. And so they're describing the logos, the structure, the truth, the reality of the universe. Okay. So we just do this simple exercise and you'd think, oh, you know, my clients, they're not going to wrap their minds. No, they love it. They absolutely love to talk about the big picture of the universe. And, you know, I even talk about, you know, if the constants and the laws in the universe even changed a little bit, that you wouldn't exist. And they go, wow, yeah, I suppose that's true. Okay, so could we even say that the universe exists in a way where your life is possible? Well, yeah, good. Do you think that life can be good? And they said, yeah. I said, they say, yeah, I think life can be good. but as long as you follow the laws of the truth and reality in the universe, right? Yeah, that's right. Okay, see where I'm going with that?
No, I do.
And so we keep going along those lines. Okay, if life can be good, and it seems to have a design so that it could be good for you, and even your existence is possible because of that, and no one in existence has ever existed like you, and you are unique and special in that way. Do you suppose maybe that means you got a certain purpose while you're on this planet? Do you know where they go with that?
I'm tracking with you.
Yes. That means because I'm unique and special, born at a place and time as a certain person within this design, within this universe. And you would think that, how can they even track with that, right? They do, Bill. They track with everything that I just said. And of course, that is a sense of awe and inspiration. And it leads them to understanding there is a creator and sustainer beyond the universe itself. Cool?
That's so cool.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So then the next place, I love where Paul goes. He even says, God is near. And that's where God is near. He's close. He's not far off. He's not the unmoved mover in Greek philosophy. He's not in the Platonic ideal in another sphere altogether. He's near. And so that's when I go to, after I said everything I just said, I will say, well, then could you say that God is personal? And they would say, yeah. Do you think God is relational, that God is even in a sense wants a relationship with you, or even if you say higher power, we're still getting the same place. And they say, yeah. Do you think perhaps in the way we just talked about that God is loving and cares particularly for you as a special and unique human being that has never existed before and will never exist again? And they go to yes.
Wow.
Isn't that cool? Yeah.
You've walked them right into a place where they have agreed with everything to this point.
That's right.
They're not pushing back against you, are they?
No. I mean, there's occasionally people who are, naturalists, materialists, or they think they're being scientific,
Sure.
and then we go from there. But I start with where they're at, and so then where we go to, and this is cool, also very powerful and impactful. Paul then is basically saying that God is evident. That God is, he even takes it for granted that the God is evident to these deep thinking philosophers in the Areopagus. And he then goes to that they would understand that truth. Now, what's interesting is how do you bridge that with clients? And so if you start describing like serendipity, like things seem to happen, but they seem to happen for a purpose, and that purpose seems to be good for me. That's serendipity, right? That's a spiritual experience.
Okay.
Do you think so or not?
Oh yeah, I mean
Okay,
that's a God moment. I think.
I think so too.
I think there's nothing inconsequential in God's economy.
No, that's right.
Nothing.
That's right. Yeah, or if you talk about the laws of accountability, like what goes around comes around.
Sure.
What you sow, you reap, and so on. They believe in that.
Yeah.
That means there's a law of consequences,
Of course.
spiritual consequences in the universe, and they believe that.
Mm-hmm.
Now we have another common ground, don't we?
Yeah.
With them. So then this next one, which is what the Greeks really got hung up on, which is he used the word for resurrection, which is anastasis. Anastasis, and of course most of them have either no concept of resurrection from the dead, or what N.T. Wright calls life after death. Because that's the right doctrine with that. But but what is he introducing to them? At the deepest core of a human being, they want to know that change and transformation is possible, and not just for some eternity that they can't necessarily conceptualize, but for right here from right now. Mm-hmm. So now Paul is reaching in and introducing them the idea of resurrection. And Jesus' resurrection, when you think about it, he didn't just resurrect. He ascended. He was glorified. He was seated. He was given power. He was given position, right?
Yeah.
And he was glorified into, so resurrection in our understanding introduces life transformation and change.
So good. Tim, what a great way to end. Thank you so much for being on the show. Dr. Tim Walsh has been my guest. That's unfortunately all the time we have. I'd still love to continue this discussion with Tim. If you missed any of it, head to the podcast at myfaithradio.com. I hope you have a wonderful night. Thanks for spending time with me today. Thanks for listening. Programming like this is made available through your support. Information available at myfaithradio.com.